In the city of Ravenna in northeast Italy, in the church of San Vitale, there is a series of very beautiful mosaics made of glass that represent leading figures of the Eastern Roman Empire in the 500s. The Eastern Roman Empire was also known as the Byzantine Empire. And among the figures portrayed in those mosaics is Emperor Justinian, who was the head of the Eastern Roman Empire in Constantinople in the mid 500s. Justinian was a Latin speaker, and his most famous accomplishment was reconquering much of Europe and North Africa and restoring Roman order and pushing back the earlier conquests of groups like the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths and the Vandals. Back in the late 400s, the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths and the Vandals were involved in conquering the western territories of the Roman Empire. And in 476, child Emperor Romulus was deposed, and the new rulers of the central Roman lands included figures like Odoacer, known as Odoacros in Greek, and one of his successors, Theodoric, who ruled as king of the Visigoths and king of the Ostrogoths. So Justinian was known for attempting to push back the rule of the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths, and then over in Tunisia, the Vandals, and bringing back Roman lands under Roman rule. But obviously there were some differences there because Justinian ruled from Constantinople, not Rome. Now, Constantinople was still a Roman city, because even in the late decades of Roman rule in the city of Rome, there was the Roman emperor in Rome, and then there was a second emperor based in Constantinople. That method of political rule across the empire dated back to the 300s, when you had Roman Emperor Constantine establishing a second capital in the east, partly to have more direct control over the eastern frontiers, where the Romans were competing for territory in places like Syria and Iraq with the Sasanian Empire. The Romans were also concerned about these growing conquests of people who spoke German-related languages, eventually the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths and the Vandals. And then even in the Roman Middle East, there were centuries of figures who, in some cases, were working together with the Romans, and in some cases would rebel against the Romans. So Queen Zenobia in Palmyra in the 200s was one of these Eastern territory figures in Syria who rules the region in alliance with or in collaboration with the Romans as part of the Roman Empire, but then she actually rebels and mints coins in her name. So Justinian attempts in the 500s, after the fall of Rome, a few decades after the fall of Rome, after the Vandals take over Tunisia, after the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths have taken over Italy, France, and Spain, Justinian attempts to restore Roman order by bringing all of these lands back under the rule of the Romans, but more under Constantinople than Rome. And one of the tasks there is the military conquest, which he accomplishes through the leadership of his head military officer, Belisarius. And the other way he seeks to accomplish this restoration of Roman order is by bringing the old Roman ecclesiastical leadership, what is basically the Roman Church, what eventually becomes the Roman Catholic Church in the western half of the empire, bringing their loyalties or directing their loyalties away from Rome and towards Constantinople. One of the reasons Justinian wants to marginalize or sideline the ecclesiastical leadership in Rome is because moving into the 5, 6, and 700s, part of the ecclesiastical Roman leadership, the church, is increasingly participating in growing partnerships with these Germanic language rulers, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, but more so the Lombards and especially the Franks. By the time you get to the 700s, Frankish ruler Charlemagne of the Frankish Empire, which controls France, Germany, part of Italy, Charlemagne has now positioned himself as the political patron and supporter of the Roman Church. And he sees and positions the Frankish Empire as a kind of successor to the old Roman Empire. But back in the 500s, Justinian is trying to outmaneuver these figures by making the Eastern Romans, also remembered as the Byzantines, he's trying to make the Eastern Romans the true successors of the Roman Empire by bringing all of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East under his rule in Constantinople. And that's one of the reasons why in the mosaic you can see this interesting halo behind his head. On the one hand, he is a political and military head of an empire. And on the other hand, he's also a religious figure because he himself is positioning himself as the patron and supporter of the entire Roman ecclesiastical network of bishops and deacons and whatnot. So let's take a look at a picture of this church. So this is the church of San Vitale, and it is a basilica, and it's in Ravenna. And again, the choice of Ravenna in northeast Italy rather than Rome as Justinian's local center of political and religious leadership in Italy is partly connected with his attempt to redirect military, popular, and religious loyalties eastward towards Constantinople and away from the centers of Visigothic, Vandal, Ostrogoth, and later Lombard and Frankish rule. And so inside the Church of San Vitale, you see all these mosaics made of small pieces of glass tile. And the background is often set in gold of different representations of angels and religious figures. The fact that these mosaics are in this style, which is more connected with Eastern Roman and Greek art and visual culture than it is Italian art and visual culture, tells us something about how Justinian was absorbing and supporting and elevating Eastern Roman and Greek styles of art, visual culture, and popular culture. So he's still a Greek speaker. He's still a Latin speaker, but there's a bit of a turn towards Greek culture that's happening here. Even under the Roman Empire in the 400s, where Latin and different versions of varieties of Latin were spoken throughout Italy, France, Spain, northern Tunisia, the Eastern Roman lands still had this preference for using Greek as a language of education and learning, science. It was a language of many of the elites throughout the Eastern Roman lands in Greece, what is now Turkey, Syria, Egypt. And that Greek or Hellenistic dimension of Eastern Roman culture back in the 300s and 400s goes back to the time and the legacy of Alexander the Great, a few hundred years before the time of Jesus. Alexander the Great established his empire based in what is now Greece, and it stretched into the Middle East, down into Egypt. And of course, Cleopatra in Alexandria was a descendant of one of Alexander's generals, and she spoke Greek and other languages. And when the Romans, including Julius Caesar, completed their conquest of the Eastern Mediterranean, they absorbed this Hellenistic Greek language learning and elite culture, and it became part of the eastern half of the Roman Empire's political and culture of learning and science. And so, in many ways, Justinian in the 300s, Justinian in the 500s is becoming a patron of this Hellenistic Greek dimension of Roman culture, and in some ways he's elevating it, even though he's a Latin speaker. By the time you get to the 600s and 700s, you have later Eastern Roman rulers like Heraclius, who are taking the next step of changing the language of administration of the Eastern Romans, also known as the Byzantines, from Latin to Greek. When you get to the early Islamic empires, based in places like Damascus and Syria, including the Umayyads, one of their early languages of administration is in fact Greek. And then the Umayyads changed their language of administration, including when it comes to the chancery, diplomacy, fiscal administration. They moved their language of administration to Arabic. So that Greek dimension is important, and you can see some of that Hellenistic Greek dimension of culture in the mosaics of San Vitale, the church of San Vitale in Ravenna, where Justinian is portrayed. And here are some more examples of mosaics in the church of San Vitale depicting different scenes in biblical history. And here in this particular mosaic, this is a zoomed out representation of Justinian, and he's standing next to the head of his military, Belisarius, to Justinian's right. If you're looking at the mosaic from the viewer's perspective, it's to his left. There's Belisarius. Both Justinian and Belisarius are wearing clothing in that features the imperial color of purple. So Justinian is wearing, like Belisarius, and Justinian is wearing a long white shirt or a tunic, and over that shirt he wears a purple robe, which from the viewer's perspective on the top left, the purple robe is held onto his white shirt with a brooch that has jewels hanging from it. And connected to the brooch from the viewer's perspective on the lower left of that brooch is a piece of fabric with a bird on it. And Belisarius likewise is wearing a long white tunic or shirt, and there's an imperial purple stripe indicating his rank as part of the head of the military. And then further left from the viewer's perspective are certain royal guards. From the viewer's perspective to the right, that's where you have leaders of the Eastern Roman Church, including Maximianus. And Maximianus is the archbishop, the bishop of Ravenna. And this is where you begin to see some of the history of a distinction or rivalry between the Bishop of Rome, who is also the Pope for what becomes the Roman Catholic Church after the 1000s, when Rome and Constantinople have this schism between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. Maximianus, you can see here, is the Bishop of Ravenna, and there's some early rivalry there between different bishops, the Bishop of Ravenna, the Bishop of Rome. And again, in the 500s, 600s, and 700s, one of the questions there politically and religiously in terms of rivalries is whether bishops are more loyal to the Frankish rulers in Paris and Aix-la-Chapelle in France and Germany, or are these bishops more loyal to the Eastern Roman rulers in Constantinople? And this is where in the 500s, Justinian, a Latin speaker, is trying to direct all loyalties of the bishops whom the Visigoths and Ostrogoths allowed to remain in their positions after the conquest of the Western Roman lands. Justinian is trying to redirect all of their loyalties to Constantinople. And so part of the goal of Justinian in conquering these lands west of Greece into Italy, France, Spain, Tunisia, part of the goal there is in collaboration with the head of the military, Belisarius, is to actually militarily push back the Vandals out of Tunisia and push back the Ostrogoths out of Italy, eventually move into the lands where the Lombards and the Franks are in France. There's a military goal there of pushing out all these groups, and there's also the religious loyalties goal of having all of the bishops turn their loyalties towards the Bishop of Ravenna, who in turn is loyal to Justinian in Constantinople. And that's where you can see a lot of this political theater here in this mosaic. And if we look more closely again at the portrayal of Justinian, that halo again, and likewise that purple imperial robe and that crown with all of its jewels of sapphire, emerald, all of that tells us that Justinian is the head of a military network of leaders and also a religious network of leaders, and he's trying to centralize all of this authority in the position of the emperor of the Eastern Romans in Constantinople. Here's a close-up of Belisarius, who from the viewer's perspective is standing to the left of Justinian. And Belisarius was successful, considered one of the most successful military rulers in Roman and Eastern Roman history, because in the 500s he successfully does capture a lot of central North Africa from the Vandals in what was known as the Vandalic Wars. And he also captures much of Italy from the Goths, the Ostrogoths. And what Justinian and Belisarius do is they reorganize the provinces of the Roman Empire according to something called exarchates. And so there were the old provinces of the original Roman Empire, where you had you would have an ecclesiastical something like provinces, and then you'd have these civil provinces. And under Justinian, you had new provinces called exarchates, and you had two large ones. One was based in North Africa, in Tunisia, and then the second was based in Italy, in Ravenna. And Rome eventually becomes, again, a bit more sidelined as less central to Eastern Roman authority in Constantinople than it was previously back in the 400s, when there was a single Roman Empire. And this is the mosaic of Maximianus, the Bishop of Ravenna, who is trying to secure the loyalty of other bishops throughout the empire. Now, another mosaic in the San Vitale Church is the mosaic of Theodora, who is the wife of Justinian. And she's wearing all sorts of interesting jewelry as part of her crown there, and also wearing a purple imperial robe. So in many ways, what these rulers are wearing, Justinian and Theodora, these are technically Roman clothes that are connected with Roman elite clothing. But on another level, especially when it comes to the kind of lavishness of this clothing, the jewelry, some of this draws on the elite cultures, the cultures of the elites in Eastern, Middle Eastern, and Persian lands, especially when it comes to, again, the jewelry. And while we don't have the actual crown of Theodora today, we do have different varieties of jewelry that archaeologists have excavated that were made in some of the same imperial workshops. And so you can see in surviving examples that these pieces of jewelry, necklaces, bracelets, earrings. They feature precious stones that were very expensive back then, and they remain expensive and rare today. So sapphire, rubies, emeralds, different types of glass connected with gold. And these are the kinds of jewelry, pieces of jewelry that are depicted in the mosaic of Theodora and likewise Justinian in this mosaic. Even the piece of fabric from the viewer's perspective on the lower left of Justinian's mosaic, the brooch that holds his imperial robe to his shirt, what's connected to the brooch on the bottom left, what looks like a piece of fabric with a bird on it. Similar types of fabrics or pendants survive today from the Eastern Roman Empire, and this is one example. So let's take a look now at the map. Now this is a map of the successes of the of Justinian and his military leader, head of the military Belisarius, as they managed to conquer parts of Europe and North Africa for Constantinople. And here in this map, this is what is now Turkey, what was then Eastern Roman Anatolia. Here's Greece, and then here is Egypt. Here's the Middle East, Syria, Jordan, and they managed to now extend Eastern Roman rule over to Italy, Tunisia, North Africa, part of Spain. And that again was the process of military ruler Belisarius pushing out the Vandals from Tunisia and then pushing the Ostrogoths back from Italy northward and trying to fend off the rising Franks and Lombards. In this other map here, we can see more closely what they did once they completed those conquests. They established two exarchates, one based in Italy here, and another exarchate based in Tunisia. An exarchate being a kind of a province ruled by an exarch, and under the rule of the exarch would be different local dukes and local bishops. There was even a Duke of Rome. And here, the Duke of Rome, the Duchy of Rome here, this is where Rome is no longer the capital of this new Roman Empire. It's just a smaller duchy within, like a duke-led province within the Exarchate of Italy, based in Ravenna in northeast Italy. And so this is where the Bishop of Rome is now less politically important than the Bishop of Ravenna, who was the figure Maximianus represented in the mosaic there. And again, part of what Justinian and the Eastern Romans in the 500s onward and the 600s are trying to do is to try to prevent or at least slow down the process of the Bishop of Rome, who is living in this kind of prestige city of Rome with a prestigious history. The Eastern Romans are trying to prevent the Bishop of Rome and some of the bishops connected with southwest Italy from establishing growing connections with some of these figures whom the Eastern Romans saw as continued invaders, like the Franks. And again, by the 600s and 700s, the Franks have successfully established a partnership with the Bishop of Rome, and this is where, by the 700s and 800s, you have an independent papal state ruled by the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, which stretches across a band of land from Western Italy to Eastern Italy, which is ruling in partnership with the Frankish kingdom. And Charlemagne, by the 700s, and his successors are seeing themselves as a type of new Roman ruler, even while the Eastern Romans are seeing themselves as the true successors of the ancient Romans. And at some level, the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, by the 700s, is also seeing himself as a successor to the old Roman emperor. So you're seeing a lot of different people who are trying to kind of inherit the prestige of the old Roman Empire. Now, one of the things by the late 500s and 600s, which makes Justinian and his successors um, not as successful as they hoped, is number one, the Frankish kingdom does become extremely powerful and does establish connections with bishops throughout Italy. And the Frankish kingdom does, in fact, manage to, together with the Lombards, invade much of Italy. The Visigoths, they hold on to Spain, and then even more of a threat to the Byzantines is the fact that one of the Eastern Romans' allies in the Middle East, who are Arabic-speaking Christian tribes, the Benu Ghassan, in the 500s, that alliance falls apart by the 600s when you get Arabic-speaking Muslim tribes who are now running in their own empire based in Damascus and previously the city of Medina. So a lot of these Arabic-speaking Christian and Arabic-speaking Muslim groups are now part of the administration of a new Arab empire that has now taken over Eastern Roman Egypt, Eastern Roman Syria, and Jordan. And that empire has also taken over the entire Persian Empire, which was a former adversary of the Eastern Romans. And one of the problems that the Eastern Romans were already running into that appears to have facilitated this process of Arab expansion into the Byzantine Middle East is the fact that the Eastern Romans were already running into some problems of loyalty when it comes to Middle Eastern ecclesiastical leadership, because Eastern Romans in the 500s were still trying to get a lot of the Middle Eastern and Egyptian religious leadership to maintain ecclesiastical loyalty to Constantinople. But those churches were not in quote unquote communion with Constantinople. So there was a religious schism that took place in Roman history, where even way back in the late 400s, Roman Constantinople saw the Middle Eastern churches, including the Syrian Orthodox Church and the Egyptian Orthodox Church, as outside the fold of Roman Christianity based in Roman Constantinople. So in other words, centuries before the 1000s, before Roman Constantinople have this Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox schism, centuries earlier, at the end of the Roman Empire in the 300s and 400s, there's already problems between Roman Constantinople on the one side, and then cities like Alexandria in Egypt, Antioch on the borders of Syria, where the Middle Eastern churches, the Syrian Orthodox Church and the Coptic Orthodox Church, they are not seeing eye to eye with Constantinople. And you begin to see some problems there when it comes to Constantinople wanting to install its own Roman ecclesiastical administration, including bishops and deacons in Alexandria and Egypt and in Antioch. And so you end up seeing kind of rivalries in the church there. And so all these Middle Eastern churches end up being subsumed into the Arab empires, the Islamic empires, where part of the history there is this question of whether these Middle Eastern churches end up getting more independence to manage their own ecclesiastical affairs in comparison with how much independence they had under the Eastern Roman rule. So in either case, the Eastern Romans in the 500s, they're trying to establish a kind of restore Roman authority across all of North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe under Constantinople, but they're dealing with the Franks, who are still very powerful, and the Visigoths, who are powerful, and they're also dealing with, as early as the 500s, these Arabic-speaking Christian tribes like the Benu Ghassan, who are very powerful, and who are ruling as satellite allies of the Eastern Romans, but who eventually end up being subsumed into the administration of the Islamic caliphates. So the Eastern Romans are not as successful as they hoped they would be, and this is a representation of some of these Islamic rulers in Spain. Of course, the Islamic caliphates, the Arab caliphates, in the 600s and 700s, when they stretch as far west as Morocco and Spain, at this point they are ruling these Muslim rulers are ruling lands where you have ecclesiastical leadership in Spain formerly under Visigothic rule that uses Latin as their church language, and these are bishops that are very far from Constantinople, and so their immediate loyalties in terms of religious leadership are to Rome, and this just tells us how unrealistic it was for Constantinople to try in the 500s to get all of Roman ecclesiastical leadership and all of the provinces under its rule. It's such a vast empire, and Rome is closer to the center of it, which is why Rome was the center of the Roman Empire. And Constantinople in the Far East, it would have been unrealistic to expect Constantinople to be securing the loyalty of all of these bishops in Spain, particularly when they're under all sorts of non-Eastern Roman rulers, like the Visigoths in the 600s, and then by the 700s, Muslim rulers. And this is a coin of Charlemagne. So not only are the Eastern Romans dealing with Islamic rulers in the 600s and 700s, but they're also dealing with the Franks. And by the 700s, the Franks are minting coins like this one, Carolus, Charlemagne, Charles. And this other side on the right says Imperator Augustus. So they're minting coins that make the Franks, that make themselves look like they are new Roman emperors in Latin. That phrase, Imperator Augustus, that's the phrase associated with the old Roman rulers dating back to Julius Caesar. And so in some ways, Carolus, Charles, Charlemagne is like a new Caesar. And at this point, when you get into the 700s, really the two main players in town in the Mediterranean are the Islamic empires based in Damascus and Baghdad, and the Frankish Empire based in France and Germany and Italy. And this is a painting from the 1800s that imagines what the scene would have looked like when the Caliph Harun al-Rashid on the left here, under the Abbasid Empire based in Baghdad, which was powerful in the 700s and 800s. Harun al-Rashid on the left, receiving in the center some emissaries from the Frankish Empire. So really, as you get into the 700s and 800s, the Eastern Romans based in Turkey and Greece, they're becoming less and less influential in the entire Mediterranean region, but they still remain there all the way into the 1400s when they are conquered by the Ottoman Empire. Even before they're conquered by the Ottoman Empire, the Eastern Romans in Constantinople are temporarily conquered by the Crusaders. So very interesting. So here again is this representation of Justinian and his military leader, Belisarius, and the Archbishop of Ravenna, Maximianus, as Justinian successfully, or at least has some success in the 500s as a Latin speaker in restoring the Roman lands under Roman authority in Constantinople, but at the same time dealing with some obstacles when it comes to continued military abilities of the Franks and the Lombards, the Goths, And then likewise in the 500s, growing power of these Arabic-speaking groups, including the Banu Ghassan, Christians, and then eventually Banu Umayyah, the Umayyad Empire, and the like.